What's up, everyone? I'm Sophia Pasternak, an award-winning author and mental health professional, and this channel is all about the intersection where writing meets psychology. I also post stuff about my author journey, baking bread, and outdoorsy stuff. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you're notified when I post a new video. My doggie is sleeping now. We took her outside and ran around, and now she's tired. So hopefully I won't have anybody chewing on me for this video. Today, I want to talk about one of my favorite schemas, is emotional inhibition, which sounds pretty cut and dry, inhibiting your emotions, but let's kind of get into the why. So for people with the emotional inhibition schema, the worst thing ever is to lose control. If they lose control of their emotions, it's a catastrophe. So they do whatever they can to keep those emotions very tightly under control. They believe that emotions are embarrassing, shameful, so you can't feel them or you will be embarrassed and shameful. These types of characters avoid any show of affection, and it's not just because I'm too good to show affection. It's, I am so humiliated by the show of affection, I can't even handle it. They value self-control over intimacy to the extent where they inhibit emotions that would be healthy to express at that moment. These aren't the people who, are kind of unreactive most of the time, but show these, little kind of tender behind the scenes emotional moments. These are the people who, they don't tell their spouse they love them. They shake their hand instead or something like that. It's not cute. It's upsetting, especially if you're one of the loved ones of one of these people. Emotional inhibition can even kind of show up as almost obsessive compulsive behaviors. They will get very attached to rituals, especially rituals that are logical. So when we talk about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, one of the kind of hallmarks of those rituals is that they're not really logical and the person knows it, but they do them anyway. It's not logical for me to think that if I wash my hands so many times, a bus isn't going to crash somewhere, but that kind of becomes the logic in some cases. So the compulsions and the rituals in obsessive compulsive disorder don't necessarily always line up with what they're trying to prevent. And in emotional inhibition, these rituals are very we're going to follow all the rules. We have all these very strict rituals, and they're all based on logic and rationality. And in the most extreme cases of this schema, they will try to control the emotions of the people around them. So most of the time it's just, I'm not going to show emotion, but if you want to embarrass yourself like that, go ahead. But when this starts to get extreme, even other people expressing emotions will make kind of secondhand embarrassment, secondhand shame, and so they can't even handle being around people who are expressing emotions. So they'll either remove themselves or they will start to get on other people. You don't need to be that excited all the time. You don't need to be such a crybaby, that kind of a thing. This schema shows up develops through childhood when your character's attachment figure is highly critical of any kind of emotion. And it can be the result of cultural norms where they're very emotionally restricted. There are some cultures that do kind of value that emotional dampening, and these are the people who take that a little bit too far. So in my schema overviews video, I talk about overcompensators, avoiders, and surrenderers. So for the emotional inhibition schema, our overcompensators, you act like the opposite of the schema is true. And so I kind of touched a second ago upon how people with the emotional inhibition schema can become very attached to rituals and logic and reason. And so one of the ways they overcompensate is to throw logic and throw reason and rationality out the window, be very impulsive, and especially being very impulsive under if they're drinking. So if somebody's very emotionally locked up most of the time, they will get drunk as an excuse to go crazy because they feel like they have a thing to blame it on. Oh, I was so drunk, I don't know what I was doing. That's not how I am. But in fact, it was just they desperately wanted to express that emotion. And so they're looking for the excuse basically of, I was so drunk, I was so high, I was so X to do that. Another way to overcompensate is that they will force emotion, even though they feel really uncomfortable, and it's obvious they feel really uncomfortable doing it. They don't know how to express emotion, and it makes them feel even more awkward. The avoiders avoid, so they won't be in any relationship that requires emotional expression, so they won't date anybody, or they'll date somebody else who's also emotionally inhibited, so they don't care. So they won't put themselves into the situation where they have to express emotions. And like, these are the people who, when you invite them out, hey, let's go out dancing, they're like, no, absolutely not. Like, no, sorry, I'm getting brain surgery that night. Like, they don't want to go. Dancing is a physical expression of emotion. When you're dancing, you are expressing emotion. And so that's just, nope, they wouldn't write books, they wouldn't write poetry, or if they did, it would be this shameful secret that they would never share with anyone. So any kind of expression of emotion they avoid activities that involve that. And they don't discuss or express feelings. They just, nope, it's none of your business, I don't care, bye, and take off. And then we have the surrenderers. So the surrenderers completely buy into the schema. Yes, the schema is true. Yes, expressing emotion is bad. And they will emphasize being rational over expressing emotion to the point where they'll put other people down for getting excited about things. And they will have, in the therapy biz, we call it a flat affect. And that's just people who are like all the time, and they talk in a very flat tone of voice, and they don't really express or emote at all, and they're not a whole lot of fun to hang out with. They are interesting to have as patients, people who have a very flat affect. It's kind of challenging because it makes me work extra hard to kind of try and understand what they're feeling on the inside, because they do feel feelings, they just don't like feeling those feelings, and so they will express the absence of feelings, if that makes sense. So that very flat affect, very controlled, and they're the opposite of spontaneous. They don't have a spontaneous bone in their body. Everything has to be very controlled, and if we engage in spontaneity, then maybe an emotion will pop up, and I don't want that, so very tightly controlled, very rigid. Also, in my schema overviews video, I talked about the lie, the want, the truth, and the wound. And the lie is the schema. So for this particular schema, lies could look something like, I really worry about losing control of myself, control of my emotions and my actions. It is humiliating to express my emotions to others. I have a lot of anger built up inside me, but I can't express it, so I just eat it myself. If I lose control of my emotions, something bad is going to happen. And the want is based upon one of those being true, which is the incorrect thing that your character thinks they need to be happy. So in this case, the want would be something like, if I can very tightly control my emotions, everything will be okay. If I never express a single emotion, I will be fine, which is really bad. One of the things that I do with a lot of my patients is try to get them into that space of, it's okay to feel emotions. You're supposed to feel emotions. And I kind of liken it to, in my therapy, I deal a lot in metaphors. I love metaphors. If you've ever read any of my writing, I try to limit the amount of metaphors I cram in there, but like I can't help it. I love them so much. So for these patients, I want you to imagine, let's go through an exercise together. I want you to imagine, if you will, that you are standing on one side of a big, deep, dark pit, and it's bottomless, and if you fall down that pit, you will be lost forever. And you have a rope. And on the other side of that pit, there's a monster, and it has the other end of the rope, and it's pulling. And you have to pull back, or you're going to fall into this pit. And that monster is emotions. That monster is every emotion you don't want to feel. And you are trying your best to resist this monster. I am not going to feel these emotions. I am not going to be involved here. So I am yanking on this rope to keep it from pulling me into this pit where I will be lost forever in this, bottomless nothingness of emotions. And so I take my patients through that metaphor, and then I say, well, what do you think? Like, what would you do? You can't pull on that rope forever. You'll get tired. Let's pretend that monster has like 20 arms and like Monster Energy drinks, and like it's going to go forever, and you're getting tired, and it's pulling you toward that hole, and you're going to fall in that hole. What do?
And so often that, I don't know, like maybe is there something I can tie the rope to, and maybe I can get a friend to help me and stuff like that. And no, that's not right. Sorry, not right. What do? You let go of the rope. You stop fighting it. You just drop it, and that's all. Like, the more that you fight your emotions, the more exhausted you're going to be, because they're never going to not be there. You will always have, that monster is always going to be on the other side of that hole. The hole will always be there, and there's always going to be that rope. But you can make the choice about whether you pick up the rope or not to fight your emotions. My Amazon package shipped. So yeah, you don't have to always be battling with this emotion of fear or anxiety or depression or whatever else you're struggling with. You just let the rope go. And sometimes that means that you have to sit there and you have to just experience the emotion. We have an acronym called RAIN, and I'm actually going to link that down below. I don't want to like take up my whole video going over it. But if check out RAIN, see if that's something that, like, it applies very well to people like this who are very just no emotions. And when I'm trying to encourage them, yes, you have to feel your emotions. The more you fight your emotions, the more exhausted you're going to be. So here is RAIN is a good, it's an acronym. It's a good little strategy for being able to feel comfortable feeling your emotions. And sometimes emotions are uncomfortable, and I tell them that's just the truth of it. Sometimes you're uncomfortable feeling these emotions. Everybody is. Emotions sometimes are really uncomfortable, but I'm going to help you get past that. So that's part of, especially patients I have who have had trauma in their past. And when they feel those emotions, it hurts a lot and it brings up that trauma. So they just shut it down, and then they have other dysfunction that kind of stems off of that emotional shutting down. So nope, we're going to work through your trauma. We're going to get you back feeling good emotions, and we're going to teach you how to feel those negative emotions. Because if you suppress emotions, you can't pick and choose. You can't just suppress the bad ones. You suppress all of them. All of your emotions get suppressed. They're all kind of on the same bandwidth, and they're on the same frequency. And if you turn off one part of that frequency, the whole thing goes dark. So anyway, I'll get off that tangent. So we talked about the want, what your character thinks they need to be happy. I need to not feel emotions, which is 100% false. What they need is the truth. And the truth is, in this case, something like be capable of experiencing emotions in a healthy way. I need to be able to manage the discomfort I feel with negative emotions so that I can actually let them in. I can feel, I'm going to feel anxious, but I'm also going to be able to feel happy. The wound is what caused this in the first place. And like I said, it can be having a parent who is very emotionally restrictive, and can even be a parent that like makes fun of their child for having emotions. You know, boys don't cry, that kind of thing can lead into this schema. Or being in a cultural world where the cultural norm is to be kind of emotionally dampened, and these people have just taken it a little bit too far. Okay, so get your sticky notes, open up your Word document, open your Google Docs, etc. It's time to write down, what is your character's relationship with their lie? So I just gave you some examples of what this lie could look like in person. So you can pick one of those, or you can make up your own. So the lie is that if I express emotions, bad things will happen, but that can manifest in so many different ways. So think of how that relates specifically to your character, how they interpret the idea of emotions are bad. My donkey's sleeping. Okay. Now I want you to make a list of a few things, what would happen to reinforce that lie. So they expressed emotion in front of an abusive caretaker and they made fun of them. Or maybe they even got punished for expressing emotion. That cultural norms thing, culturally, we don't do that here, like that kind of attitude. So that could be part of it. Or one time they took the chance, expressed emotion, and the person they expressed the emotion to had no idea what this person's backstory was and didn't respond in the way that the person expected, or your character expected. So the character went, all right, I knew it. I knew this was going to make me feel terrible. That's validation right there. I'm never expressing emotion again. Pick one, pick 5, Make a list. And now I want you to make a list of things that could happen that would challenge that lie. So they went out on the limb to express emotion to somebody, and that person actually responded really well. And they went, oh, wow. Okay, some of my patients, the first time that they ever express emotion is with me, because I am legally bound to never tell anybody that they cried in my office. I would never do that. And so I'm a safe person. So I kind of model, I'm able to be the model of, this is how people should act when you express emotion to them, and you should feel comfortable enough doing it. You should feel comfortable enough doing it so that you can do it, and you don't have to sit there and just be locked inside the prison of your own emotions. When you are writing and you're kind of stuck, or when you're revising and you need to cut things, examine every scene that you have and say, does this validate their schema, or does this invalidate their schema? If you're writing a scene and it doesn't serve the lie, then why is it there? Because moving your character forward, keeping up that momentum of kind of discovering the truth of that opposes the lie that they've been stuck in, that's kind of the whole point, in my opinion, of writing a book. So we're moving the character from point A to point B, and you always want to be moving in that arc. And if you have a scene that has nothing to do with the arc, then you have that gap, and it's like that bump. So make sure that every scene you write serves that lie somehow. It's either disproving it or it's enforcing it. And that's all for this schema. That's all for the emotional inhibition schema. That video was a little bit longer than I usually do, but I did kind of go into my metaphor stuff. So I hope that was helpful. I will link Rain, and I will link, kind of those emotional metaphors down below if I can find them. And yeah, so that's all from me. Have a great day.